Welcome to my YouTube channel. When you open any character's profile, you see a list of their attributes, which has a significant effect on how good they are at their role. Underneath the attribute list are that character's retinue and traits. The sum of these gives you the totals for the attributes. I would just like to clarify that this is not an exhaustive look at every possible trait or retinue for every character. That video would likely be at least 2 to 3 hours long. Rather, it is to explain the principle and game mechanics relating to the traits and ancillaries, and any other information which may be of use or interest to the player. Hover your cursor over a trait or ancillary and this will show you details on the exact effect on the character, plus a description, which may occasionally be amusing. Traits and retinue will sometimes give attributes that are not clearly displayed on the character card, such as movement points, and you must read through the descriptions in order to see this. Just to be clear, in this video I'm talking about any general or other agent, such as a merchant, priest, princess, or even a rebel one, such as a witch. The traits and retinue a character may gain of course differ by character type. Some are unavailable to characters of the same type but of different factions. However, there are themes and mechanisms that are common across all of these different categories. The manual advises the player to consider the traits and retinue as side effects of the life events of that character rather than abilities earned. If you stay to the end of the video, you will get to see 5 of the most amusing traits and retinue. Retinue are the simplest to explain, therefore we will cover this first. They work on an on-off binary type principle. The character either has a specific retinue or they don't. It may be a person or persons, an animal, or a physical object. They are usually gained at the end of turn, on creation, or following a character using or being the target of an active ability. I shall refer to this as a test point for the rest of the video. Most of them require a certain condition to be met, such as the presence of a specific building or a specified event occurring. Then there is a certain chance of a character gaining that retinue. This chance could range from being 100% to being very unlikely. Some retinue have several conditions that may allow them to be gained. There are a small number that have no conditions and have a small chance of being randomly obtained at the end of turn or on creation. For example, a princess has a 5% chance of obtaining a secret love at the end of turn with no conditions attached. For the rest of the video, I shall refer to this concept whereby a condition or random base chance gives an opportunity for a trait or retinue to occur as a trigger. A small portion of ancillaries can be transferred to another character of the same type and faction. Have them in the same settlement or army, then drag the retinue from the character profile onto the other character's card in the bottom middle of the screen. If it is not transferable, the character will say something negative. If it is, you will get a notification that retinue has expanded. The majority of transferable retinue are relics or transport related. Only a small number of persons are transferable. Unlike the characters, transferable humanoid retinue are immortal and will not die of old age, even if they keep being transferred until centuries have passed. Some ancillaries will exclude the spawning of other ancillaries. For instance, an assassin with a young apprentice, which gives +1 to subterfuge and has a 5% chance to occur after a successful assassination, may not also have a catamite, which gives the same stats and has the same chance and conditions of occurrence, although it's not transferable. There are also unique retinue. Concrete information about this subtopic was somewhat limited, so this part of the video is a bit more speculative and less definitive than the other parts. If you know more about this, please feel free to leave a comment below. I believe that only one of these specific ancillaries can exist in a game. For example, there can only be one Gerard de Ridford. They all appear to be based on actual historical figures, such as Martin Luther the theologian or Jeanne d'Arc the saint. They tend to be more powerful than most ancillaries, but much more likely to be culture or faction specific. There is usually a short turn window in which they may appear, which I think is meant to correspond with the era that they emerged in historically. And they have a high, often 100% spawn chance when their conditions are met. Their spawning conditions are often linked to their actual life events. For example, Michelangelo, the Renaissance artist, has a 100% chance to be gained upon completion of an artist studio between turn 209 to 242. The attributes they give are mostly appropriate to what they actually did. For example, Paracelsus the physician gives bonus hit points to a general. Marco Polo the explorer gives a bonus to movement points and trade income. I have not been able to find any unique ancillaries for characters other than generals, and I haven't found any that are transferable. Traits are a bit more complicated than retinue. It may be useful to imagine a trait path as being on a ladder. A trigger will occur at a test point, and this will have a possibility to start that character on a trait path. Some traits have several potential triggers. Once a character has started on a trait path, further triggers may push them up or down this ladder. Of these, I have identified two different progress mechanisms. One, a trigger leads to certain and a direct increase in trait progression. Some examples of this include traits linked to guilds, legacy traits, and a loyalty bonus from marrying a princess agent, which applies even if she is from another faction. The vast majority of traits seem to have a hidden point system. Designated triggers have a chance, which may be 100%, to give a character points in a trait line, although there does not seem to be any way for the player to see these. Trait lines require a certain number of points to progress per step of the ladder. Amounts of points needed to reach the same rung of the ladder but in a different line often varies. For example, Good Engineer regards 1, 3 and 6 points for stages 1, 2 and 3 of that trait line, whereas Good Farmer requires 3, 6 and 12 to reach stages 1, 2 and 3. The point systems vary from being equal or multiples of their rung of the ladder and increasing in a linear fashion to increasing in an exponential pattern. Some trait lines do not increase in a linear way, but are also not completely exponential. For example, the strong faith trait. If I was a mathematician, I would probably be able to explain this more understandably with greater accuracy, and I can only apologise if this is confusing. I hope you are still following me at this point. I also hope you are enjoying the video, and if so, perhaps consider subscribing. There are some, but not all, trait lines which exclude the presence of other trait lines. These are typically ones where it makes no sense for a character to have both, like if a general had religiously minded from a trait line that gives piety and atheist, which incidentally is misspelled in the game. Hopefully Rome will send an inquisitor to deal with this horrendous crime. These are from the trait lines public atheism and public faith, so they are anti-traits of each other. It may be useful to imagine this as one trait being the above ground ladder or positive, and the anti-trait being the below ground ladder or negative. With many trait lines, it is possible for a character to leave one trait line and start on the anti-trait if there are enough relevant triggers to cause them to lose or gain enough hidden points. As an example, I have used a general to test this on the trait lines Strategy Chivalry and Strategy Dread, which are anti-traits of each other, as occupying or exterminating a settlement give points in their trait lines with 100% chance, so it's very easy to test. He started with no Dread or Chivalry traits. He then exterminated 2 settlements, so he got to level 2 of the Strategy Dread line, as this requires 2 points. He then occupied 3 settlements, losing him these 2 points and gaining him 1 point in Strategy Chivalry, putting him at level 1 of this trait line. Fair in rule. I do not know how much this mechanic applies across the board, as I can't of course feasibly test every trait. My reading suggests this is widespread across traits that have anti-traits. I can confirm this is not universal, as some triggers can only be rolled on creation, so there is never another opportunity to move onto the anti-trait. Some trait lines have a no going back level, so once they reach this amount of points in a trait line, it is impossible for them to fall below this, and therefore impossible to move onto one of its anti-traits. Epithets occur in a small number of trait lines. Typically, they will be gained when a character has reached the highest level of a trait line, but there are some instances where a single trait line can give more than one epithet. It means that the character has a descriptor relating to that trait line after their name. For example, Prince Edmund the Honourable, King Alexander the Mean, or Gavriel the Unorthodox, the Orthodox Bishop. I am not sure what happens when a character is eligible for 2 or more epithets at the same time. I have discovered some Scottish characters called things like the Ross and the Belial, which are not epithets, but I think are related to Scottish clans. In terms of what bonuses or attributes a trait gives a character, it is not as simple as all trait lines being either good or bad. There are a large portion of trait lines which do fit into this category, but I have noticed 2 other trends. Firstly, trait lines where a low level of the trait is beneficial, but a higher level is unhelpful. For example, in the drink trait line, a general gains command and or morale from the first 2 levels, but the end stage of this trait line, paralytic, gives -5 command, -5 authority, and 10% reduction in tax income. The unchaste woman trait line gives a princess +1 and +2 charm from the first and second level, but at the final level it gives -2 charm. There are also traits which act like a double-edged sword, giving bonuses to some abilities and reducing others. One such example is the berserker trait line, which gives a bonus to a general when attacking, but reduces command when defending. For Retinue, the vast majority seem to only improve a character's attributes. A small number are completely negative, such as the Pagan Magician or Secret Love. Some are double-edged, such as Ornamental Armour, which gives +1 authority but -2 to hit points. In my opinion, the impact a player can have on traits and Retinue is significant, but you're not God, unless of course you decide to use cheats. There's quite a lot that you may try to influence, but there is also a lot that are either impossible or impractical to do this with. The trigger must be something that the player can take action to make possible or more likely. Some of the ways you can do this are construction of certain buildings. Guilds may be offered if you are completing relevant actions. For example, recruiting merchants can contribute to being offered a merchant's guild, which gives beneficial traits to merchants. There is also a thieves guild benefiting spies, an assassin's guild, and a theologian's guild. Other guilds, such as the alchemist or explorer's guild, can give your generals additional retinue. You can only have 1 guild per settlement and only 1 tier 3 guild across the whole of your lands. It may be surprising, but markets don't help merchants, and higher level in-chain buildings, such as a brothel or a pleasure palace, can only give subterfuge agents 1 or 2 retinue, no traits, so it doesn't really help them that much. Government buildings are beneficial to several characters, and I can't find any downsides of them. Some buildings are helpful to some characters while being disadvantageous to others. For instance, a cathedral may be a trigger for several good traits and retinue for priests, but may cause a merchant to be religious, reducing his finance skill. The most egregious building I have found is a pleasure palace, the top tier inn building, and its effect on your generals. It can be a trigger for the trait lines drink, girls, gambling, corrupt, expensive tastes, and pervert. Yes, that is actually a trait line. Lower tier inn buildings can cause these trait lines to a lesser degree. All of these are very bad attributes in their end stage. For buildings, it is worth remembering that you don't have to build everything everywhere. You could perhaps specialise settlements, i.e. don't build a cathedral where you've built a merchant's guild. Constructing buildings or recruiting units while a settlement has very high taxes is beneficial to the governor's traits. If taxes are low, this is disadvantageous. Constructing buildings before a grain exchange is built is bad for your governor. Making trade-related buildings and recruiting merchants is good. The construction and presence of farming buildings, mines, religious buildings, or academic buildings while your general is present gives triggers for useful traits and retinue. Adoptions, whether offered by notifications or man of the hour event, is a trigger for several completely or mostly negative trait lines for biological sons. It is not usually good for any character's traits or retinue to leave them doing nothing. Sending an agent to use active abilities with a high chance of success will generally be helpful to them. Sending a governor out of his settlement to defeat rebels gives a chance for triggers he can't get from settlement management. Sending a general on a holy war, whether it's Islamic or Christian, are good opportunities because there's a lot of triggers for various traits and retinue, many of which you can't get from anything else. Also, they will likely be part of quite a few battles, and assuming they survive, this will be helpful to them. I hope you have enjoyed the video thus far. If you did, don't forget to like, comment and or subscribe. If you have further information about this topic, feel free to comment below. I do apologise if anything is not completely accurate, but it is hard to come by reliable information for a game that is pushing 2 decades. Please feel no obligation, but I have a Ko-fi link in the description and will include a list of patrons in the next video, if applicable. As promised, the amusing traits and retinue. 1. Yappy Dog, a princess retinue. How can this woman possibly find this evil, overgrown rodent adorable? -1 charm. 2. Nosy Mother, a general's retinue. When there are spies in your own home, there's always a sense of unease. Gives -1 authority, but +1 to personal security. 3. Enchanted Broom, a witch's retinue. If she has dark, arcane arts at her disposal, why would she perform household chores? Gives +1 magic and 15% movement points. 4. Foreign Fruitcake, a general's retinue. I shall refrain from reading this one out. YouTube can sometimes be quite PC and my channel is fairly new. 5. Young apprentice, an assassin's retinue. Nobody suspects a child of foul play, which is why they are so brutally effective at committing it. This is transferable, confirming my theory this is an immortal demon child that terrifies its poor victims to death. And now for the traits. 1. Desperate, a princess trait. So keen on wedlock is this woman that men fear getting drunk near her, lest they wake up married. Gives -3 charm and the epithet manhunter. 2. Would-be inquisitor, a diplomat trait. So swift is this man to denounce any who would dare follow a religion aside from his own faith. He would likely make a great inquisitor. -3 influence. 3. Terrified by the English, a general's trait. Has nightmares about maypoles, tasteless cuisine, and the sickly pale Englishman responsible for it all. It is a shamefully weak paranoia. -1 morale for troops, -3 command fighting English. 4. Indolent lump, a general trait. A self-indulgent, tubby lump of inactivity, lacks any sense of life or ambition. Gives epithet the fat, -2 authority, -20% to movement points, and -15% tax income. 5. Total bimbo, a princess trait. So frustratingly stupid to the point that her future husband is more likely to chew his own arm off than to lose it in battle. Gives the epithet the dense.